Dr. Power, your guests have arrived.
Thanks, Bonnycastle. Hi, folks. Come on in, have a seat. Two more over here. Great. Well, I'm glad you joined us. This is our second session, 6 to go. Sense that the tempo is building in the course. It's picking up, and you're getting settled in. You get a sense of comfort. It'll still be a little uncomfortable probably till next week till you get that the rhythm established, and then it won't be quite so stressful. And I want to say, I don't want you folks to feel overwhelmed. The posts are picking up. Some people are doing more than 2 posts, and when I say I encourage that, I'm pleased they're doing that. There's no extra marks for it, but I enjoy the dialogue and the learning that takes place. But those that haven't got the time nor the interest in strategy, and that's fine, your interests lie elsewhere, play to your passion, play to your strength. Dizzy Gillespie said, if you can't feel it, you can't play it. So play to your strengths, and if strategy is not it, just do the basic must-dos, the deliverables. You'll get through this course with a good mark, and that's all I ask from you. Weekends, once again, I underscore the importance of life balance in my class. I'm determined where possible that Saturdays and Sundays are yours. Friday at 5 o'clock, I tend to wrap up the week's affairs. But I'm still here working. I recognize a number have no choice but to work on the weekend as well as during the week. I'll be here for you. I'll be putting, I'll be doing some review, I'll be entering out of the site and responding to some of the posts. And I'm always available to phone calls from you for the hours I said earlier at the 250-472-3836 number. Give me a dingle. Able to do that. Well, let's see what's in the news today, if we can. Well, of course, this week, as you start to read this, being a Monday, tomorrow night we do our election and the results should come in. And there seems to be a growing wave of this anybody but the ABC, anybody but Conservatives rising up. There seems to be some alliances building between the NDP and Liberals with the hope of a minority government to put Harper out of action. Well, we're going to find out tomorrow night in some sense, but if it's a minority government, that presents some interesting challenges, and we'll see a shift in the political ideology of the nation move from a bit of the right side of the house, the Aristotle side that we talked about last week, closer towards the Plato, the collectivist, the socialist, more tax, more government. Nothing wrong, just depends which side of the hand you view, the way we're going to do business in Canada. If Harper does not get elected, I think he orchestrated that himself, in the sense that he focused a lot on foreign policy, and I'm not sure we all agree with the foreign policy. Certainly I was one that did not. But with respect to the economy at home, I think they could have spent more time in the build-up to the election actually talking about the economics and talking about what do you do to the folks that are unemployed in Alberta, the great number of growing unemployed. What do you do to the Montreal textile workers and the globalization that's really impacting the car dealers in Ontario? A lot of those businesses are now find themselves under attack and downsizing as the automobile industry in Canada moves, of all places, to Mexico as part of NAFTA. And if you go to Mexico, you'll find that its automobile industry is growing leaps and bounds. It's taking from Canada and taking from America, and it's growing down there. I'd like to see more discussion on that and what we can do about that to protect jobs, as opposed to getting involved in the Syrian war, in the Iraqi war, in Ukraine. Well, Ukraine certainly has a spot we can make a cogent argument for it, but certainly no argument for us to playing around in Syria. In any event, fun to watch. We talked a bit about that last week. We can talk a bit about more as this week unfolds, if you wish. Any discussion you want to talk, if I don't mention it, you can still grab anything you want to talk about, put it up. Indeed, let me say this, if I can, that the research paper, particularly your second assignment on the Internet of Things and certain topics, there'd be absolutely nothing wrong in my mind. You found an interesting article, as one I'll refer to today, about the testing of drone cars on Canadian highways in Ontario by 2017. That's in 12 months. They're going to be testing cars in Canada on the highways. Great topic to start a discussion, and we'll get all that free research for your papers. So don't feel restricted. If you can lever and find a good question, good topic, and some article that you can get the rest of your colleagues in the cohort to have some discussion around, more power to you. It makes your papers better, it makes the course richer. I see Wynne, the Premier of Ontario, was talking about axing the Ontario pension plan that she was pushing hard to put in place to bolt on to the Canadian pension plan at some point. It's not going to happen now. It's going back, I suppose, in part because Ontario is financially in a hard place with its growing debt and deficit. Not sure they can afford it, unless the plan was, of course, to take the revenues from that and mingle them into the general revenues to help their immediate problem and kick the can down the road for paying the pensions when they came due. I don't have the answers to that, but something we can look at. I see Giuseppe takes aim at Trudeau, and they're at the, where's this place? It's the light armored vehicles with machine guns we sold to the Saudis. And it was, but they're making the point in here that it wasn't an agreement between the government of Canada and the Saudi government, but they make the point quite clearly this was an agreement between the Crown Corporation, commercial corporation, making this decision on behalf of Canada. But as we know, Crown corporations are sort of that shield that protects government. So in our province, the Insurance Bureau, the BC Hydro, the BC Ferries, et cetera, to avoid direct contact with the consumer and the clients, they always put the shield up to say, these are the folks, the villains that are doing it and making the decisions, and we can't interfere with the Crown Corporation. Notwithstanding that the Crown corporations in this province donate healthy hundreds of millions of dollars each year, which is a hidden tax, back to the general revenues from BC Hydro, BC Ferries, ICBC, etc. And so we could look at that and talk in terms of actually selling military. Is that the image you want for Canada, that we're selling military weapons to areas like the Saudis and others? And are we doing it at our own behest, or is it something that is somehow tied into the Americans, that we're a conduit, which happens all too often, that nations are conduits for another nation to do their bidding? Certainly later in this course we'll talk about Belgium, that recently has been buying up all the surplus treasury bills that have to be bought because nobody else wants them, and it's getting to the point of being ridiculous. Brussels is a small little community, and it's buying mammoth amounts of treasury bills. Leclerc says he's going to eventually legalize pot, and that ties in again to something I talk about today, is the prison industry in Canada. But certainly back in 1973 we had the Ledane Commission, which was a very reputable blue blood group, did a report, did a study on the topic, and came out with the findings that on balance marijuana wasn't necessarily a bad thing compared to all the things that could be taken into consideration. And so I think there'll be some support to legalize pot in this nation, and he said that'll be one of his planks if elected. I see Brazil. Brazil is the economic engine for South America, just as America is the economic engine for the globe. China is the economic engine for the Southeast Asia, to some extent now merging into the Middle East. In fact, it's the second largest economy in the world. Indeed, if you measure it by PPP, purchasing power parity, it's the largest economy in the world. In any event, Brazil's there, China's there, Germany is the economic engine for Europe, as we know. And when these engines sputter and stall, those that are economically interdependent shudder, as Canada shudders when America is stalling. And so here we have Brazil, which is shuddering, and the leader of Brazil is a President Dilma Rousseff. Dilma Rousseff is in the Flintstones, Dilma. And she's just got a little bit more time passed her because of a ruling in the Supreme Court that allowed her to put off the charges coming her way for impeachment while she tries to bring her ship around. But Brazil is a bit of a basket case. Economically, they're in financial trouble. They've got the Olympics coming up, and no money really to make that happen. And so we want to watch Brazil with the Olympics and the growing crime and the situation down there and the economic situation. All these engines we should be studying as strategists and figure out what impact that would have for us if we wanted to trade with South America. Article here on unsafe water, hard to swallow. They say in January, 1,669 Canadian towns had drinking water advisors saying, don't drink the water, it's not potable. Interesting, at a time when Canada has among its assets 25% of the world's fresh water. We live in a rainforest in Vancouver, Victoria, and water is not an issue that we tend to turn our minds to. And they talk in terms of putting meters on this and pricing it. I'm not sure you can take that universal application. Clearly water around the globe is a big issue. But when we live in a rainforest, should the same rules and regulations apply to us? An interesting debate, because they want to do that, don't they? They want us to meter our waters and restrict the water we put on our grass and our plants. And I would say that maybe that's should be applied with some common sense, but I could be wrong, and there's no wrong or right answers in this course. We could discuss that. Indeed, if in fact that's true, that there's not enough water in Victoria, then my question might be, then why should we be allowed contractors to build the infrastructure without schools, sewer pipes, and water systems in place? We should not allow contractors to come in to put up the high rises in the buildings and then walk away and somehow leave us parched for water. It's like a lifeboat. We can only put so many people in the lifeboat. If we don't build a bigger lifeboat, well, then maybe we have to restrict to some extent the folks that are invited in. A question, but worth a discussion. We can have a look at it. Certainly, the idea of water, again, the Site C Dam in BC, we're going to flood a wonderful valley, all the fertile grounds there right up to the edge of the mountains, so we're going to lose that arable land to put in a hydro dam, a Site C Dam, it's referred to, and I have that sense from my readings that by 2050 we'll be largely serviced for power by the green internet energy. And if that is true, then the lifespan of this thing is 30 years, and should we be destroying forever that land if in fact it's going to have little application? And the second part of that for hydro is that we don't necessarily need all that hydro. If we put the proper grid systems in that enable it, and we put the encouragement, as say Colwood has done, and in Alberta a whole city's been done, allowed us to put solar panels and grid and feed it back into the system, get a credit on the account. I think we could do something about stemming the demand, but right now we build these sites, but in large part to ship it and to sell it to California, which is starved for electricity, particularly in the summer months. And so we sell our electricity down there, and but we destroy our land to do it. Seems like penny wise, pound foolish. But let's have a discussion about all those issues. It's a fun thing to talk about. I see Obama's talking about playing the China card, about the global economy, and I guess we have to. I had a conversation with James on the site, one of the discussion sites, and it seems to me that we should think in terms of, when I joined the military back in 1955, we just had 3 domains of war: land, sea, and air. And what's evolved with the Internet of Things and over the past little decade is there's also now economic warfare, cyber warfare, and space warfare, and the cyber and the economic warfare are underway, just as it's underway now with the first 3, the traditional 3 in the Middle East. That's going on. There's war there, and I suggest to you that we are at war as cyber, and when you look at the video clip that I've asked you to look at in that Internet of Things, that's real time, what countries are doing what to whom and where they're hitting. That's going on all the time, not just nations, but it's your account and my account is being threatened. This warfare is going on for some purposes, and in the Army, it's something that you probe the front lines, but don't necessarily exploit that data today. You file it away till needed, and a lot of data is being assimilated in this data bank on who we are and where our weaknesses lie. And so it's something we could look at. Anyway, they're talking about the China card on trade and playing it, and it occurred to me that we could talk a little bit more about the economic warfare and the cyber warfare that's currently underway and the dangers of that. Would make an interesting topic. Bombardier wants to ship its Focus to Hombre. Hombre is its competitor in Brazil, and Bombardier is not doing well. It was owned by the Bombardier family, I suppose. I think that's true. For a great number of years, they had different classes of shares, Class A and Class B shares, and the shares you and I buy would be the Class B shares, which gave us no voting power, but we got a share of the dividends, the retained earnings, the profits would come our way if and when the company made money. But the control of the company was kept in the Class A shares for the family and a few special friends, and that's been ruled frowned upon of late, and so these 2-tier systems are disappearing from our corporate Canada. But anyway, the Bombardier has been stumbling for, I'm going to say, at least 15, 20 years. I've been following it, and it's been doing sort of reverse selling of shares to raise the price, and then price casts down. I'm not sure Bombardier is in that solid position, reading from this and trying to sell to Hombre, but maybe we could look a little bit as a case study Bombardier, what are they doing right, particularly with their C-class new plane that they've been working on now for almost 12 years? Do you think they're in trouble? Are they going to be around? And is it something that we can learn from that as strategists on things to do and things not to do? I see the oil patch in Alberta are really doom and gloom out there. They're meeting with the commissions, trying to talk about the new tax structure and royalty structure for the oil industry in Alberta. And the Premier, Rachel Notley, is talking about her new plans for corporate taxes and carbon policies to put some percentage on for the carbon you produce when you sell a barrel of oil. And of course, this is driving out the oil industry are hemorrhaging now, and they feel that there's going to hemorrhage even more with this new layer of burden on. But it's an NDP government. It's the type of thing that you'd expect in there: more regulations, more government, more collectivism, and more tax for the oil industry. I see Canadian insurers are looking at Uber to give them a lift. They're going to find a way to change the rules that allow these ride-sharing services to be covered properly under their insurance plan. And we talked in the Internet of Things about Uber and the changes that's going to make, particularly when they go as to drone cars for Uber. There are going to be a lot of workers at the site, and the insurance rates we said will be dropping down to the maybe as much as 60% down. And in turn, most of us may well give up our cars in favor of calling one of these drone cars from Uber, and for the 4% of the time we use a car, have it take us to school back and forth, and save the money in the iron rusting out in the alleyways the other 96% of the time. Oversupply of crude expected through to 2016. And there's much in that story. I mean, the story is basically about there's a lot of crude in the world, and crude oil runs about 94 million barrels a day is the demand supply, and it's reasonably in balance there, except we have a bit more on the supply side. So we're bulking out. Every place you can stick a drum of oil these days, it's stuck. Ships are at sea and resting on anchors and loaded with it. The strategic reserves in nations like America for 90 days are full to the brim with oil. And so as a result of that, we don't want that disrupted too much. And so what we see happening here, of course, is with the sanctions coming off Iran, if that is to happen, Iran will put another 600 barrels into the mix daily, and that distorts that balance, adds to the surplus. Saudi Arabia is determined to knock out the competition, the fracking and things of that nature, and it has the capacity and the price point that it can produce more oil and still take the hit at the lower price of 30-some odd dollars a barrel. And so there's this talk of this happening, but it's more than just the story about the price of oil and whether it's the $35 a barrel or the $65 a barrel, and the scenario planning that you should do in both those cases. What difference would either one make to your business? We should be planning for that. But this article seems to suggest that the former takes precedent over the latter, that the $35 barrel probably is where we're going to be. But the biggest story in this for me, when you peel it back and look underneath, is the vehicle currency, the global vehicle currency. And maybe it was a good time to introduce that topic. That with the Bretton Woods Agreement back in 1944, at the end of the war, those still left standing came together in Bretton Woods, a small community in America, to establish the new rules of monopoly, how the global economy was going to unfold after the war was over. And in place was put things such as the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, Reconstruction Bank, World Health Organization. Those sort of things all get put in place at this point to include the deal that America said to all the nations, you don't need gold anymore. We'll just use the American dollar, and we promise you that for every American dollar we will hold, at that time, 32 ounces of gold in Fort Knox. So anytime you want to bring that piece of paper back in, we'll give you gold. Well, it worked. Nations did well. Off it went. And then along comes the Vietnam War in the 60s, and the same thing we see happening today is that the Americans went down the basement, that the feds go down the basement to the printing press and start printing out paper and distributing it until the world's awash in American dollars, to the point they didn't have enough dollars to support it, and the French and others were knocking on the door saying, we're a little shaky, a little nervous about all this paper you're producing. Please take some of this paper back and give us some gold for our reserves. Where Nixon announced in 1971, I remember listening to on Friday night, as of Monday morning, we're off the gold standard, folks. You take on faith. You believe the dollar's worth $1 or not worth $1, but there's no gold going to be given out because they're running short of gold. And so we went on to the vehicle currency that the American dollar was going to be the base currency for the world to trade, the common denominator for all. But when they went off gold, they did a smart deal. Kissinger was very bright, good strategy player, and he went to the Saudis and said, "We will keep you in power and make sure you carry on reigning if you price the oil in U.S. dollars." And the hands were done, the shake was done, and it was all agreed upon, and the system worked. And so oil around the world has all been priced in U.S. dollars. Thereby, the demand-supply curve for U.S. dollars is always increasing. People need more U.S. dollars, and that enables the Americans to print more dollars because the demand's been going up. But that stopped. China no longer wants American dollars. They're unloading their treasury bills as fast as they can, buying anything hard that falls in your feet. That's what they're trying to buy, Canada oil, etc. Brazil wants off. Venezuela doesn't want to use the American dollar any longer. Iran has just struck a deal with Russia and with China, saying you're welcome to the oil, but it's going to be priced in the Chinese currency yuan. Russia doesn't want to use the American dollar. My point is the demand-supply curve, the demand for U.S. dollars is falling while the supply is increasing. And as we see, that brings pressure on the value of the U.S. piece of paper. It's only a promissory note I promise to pay. And as long as you and I believe the American dollar is worth something, it works. But the minute there's a run on the dollar, that we think there's some weakness in the dollar, that the dollar is about to drop, say, by 20% on Monday morning, all of a that vehicle currency disappears. And we've seen it in Portugal, in Holland, in Britain. They've all gone through having their currencies as the global currency, and the U.S. have had a pretty good run of it. But my concern is stories of this about the drop in the supply of oil and the new oil coming in, the glut of oil, and the shift from U.S. denomination for that oil to some other currency for oil is going to put pressure on the vehicle currency. And with that pressure comes big things for Canada because we're so economically interdependent on America. Well, 70% of what we produce is bought by the Americans. It was about 84%, only about 15, less than that, about 8 or 9 years ago, about 84%. And we've been decoupling, but not fast enough. We've been trying to find new trade agreements, like the TPP, to mitigate the damage. In any event, that's what that story indicates to me, is that there's all sorts of stuff in there with the vehicle currency, but we should have a look at the vehicle currency and as strategists be aware of what difference it could make. Today our dollar is showing some strength, gold is showing some strength, and as gold and oil come up marginally, our dollar will come up marginally, as well as threats to the American dollar, which could be the other side of this thing that we'll be talking more about. LNG, I'm watching the British Columbia putting the best face on it, but the price of LNG, of gas, is so low, and by all forecasts to remain low for a considerable period of time, that the Malaysian company that was one of the big players here to open up one of the LNG plants is backed out. And that's a big impact for our small province and the revenues and royalties we planned on getting from that. So we watch with interest as Christy Clark does her dance to tell us it'll all be all right, and maybe the smaller players will put these plants in. So watch for that, because it has a great bottom line impact on the future of BC. And as a result of that, it plays into the taxes for you and I as strategists in designing our strategies. A new app is, I laughed at this one, the new smartphone app is being launched for Canadians. So we can stay at home and we can buy our booze using the app and have it delivered to our house for a small fee of $10. And I sit and smile because I can recall as a young fellow in the 50s, on a Friday night, of course, we would go down to the local bootlegger and buy a bottle of beer for a premium. And in those days, that was sort of a chargeable offense. And today we have apps to deliver the alcohol to your home. So I guess I call it bootlegging. Anyway, fun story. R&D. Canada used to be a nation that got things done. Well, they're talking in terms of our geography and national transportation, but it's a puffery story about how great Canada is. But the reality is, and we've talked about in this class, is that when you have a step outside the box and see what other countries are doing, like Japan spends 2.5 times on research and development what Canada spends, there are only two things that will make a Canada or make your company great. Just two things you have to worry about. One is that you have innovation and how do you make the ground fertile for innovation, and two, you have to have entrepreneurship. And this nation has lost its innovation. This nation has lost its entrepreneurship because of red tape, etc., that has been just tying us down. It's interesting, the red tape, where the term comes from. Many of you may know, many of you don't. But red tape was from the British bureaucracy, particularly in India, when they took files, of course, in those days, the file folder got rolled over, but they had a little piece of tape that wrapped around the box of the files, and they referred to cutting the red tape to get into the files, to open up the files and get the air in there and clear it out. And so anyway, there's more red tape on that. But we have to be mindful of this too. This article, I choke when I read this sort of stuff, how good things are, in the sense that you will be reading a bit about Michael Porter's, he's got a bunch of nice models. This one's on why nations are competitive. And there are 4 determinants for why nations are competitive. And one of those main factors, determinants, is factor endowments. Those are things we're born with. And so we have basic factor endowments and we have advanced factor endowments, and basic factor endowments are simply those things that Canada has. 25% of the world's fresh water, gas, oil, gold, trees, on the list goes. We're rich, we're well endowed with the basic factor endowments. Many nations don't have what we have. But where we have to grow for this innovation and entrepreneurship is we have to encourage advanced factor endowments. And that's things such as education, that's intermodal transportation, that's the Internet of Things. We've got to spend money on these sort of things so we can truly be a competitive nation. If we do not spend that money, then we'll just be constantly cutting trees, putting them on a ship, and sending them off to somebody else to do all that work for us. And so I looked at this article about how great we are and we need to do things done in our national prosperity and all that sort of stuff. But it needs to be rewritten. Article here on the automobile. Ontario eyes 2017 to road test driverless cars. It'll be the first province to allow that. They're going to start, they said, as early as January the 1st, 2016. That's 2 months from now. They're going to be testing cars in Ontario on the highways. You need to apply for a license, but there's over 100 companies that qualify to start testing their cars. My point is, and based on the Internet of Things, look through the looking glass I've asked you to look at when you get a minute. It's not miles and miles away, folks. This is looming up pretty fast. Suncor has already put their order in for 775 large trucks. That means so much in the sense of disruption to how we currently conduct our business in so many different subsets of this industry. But we could look at that article. This was interesting, and again, it just gets you angry about business leaders and political action. And here, what they have here is a list of some of the families and companies who are donating and what they're donating to the government, and primarily it's to the Liberals. But the Demera family, that's Paul Demera, they run Power Corporation, no relation to me, but the one in Ontario. In fact, Power Corporation has been in this game now for at least 4 decades, I can recall, when Mulroney wanted to take a run at this thing away from Joe Clark as being Prime Minister. It was the Demera family that took Mulroney almost straight out of school from St. Francis Xavier as a young lawyer and put him in as the CEO of Iron Corps of Canada to groom him, and from there he springboarded in to become up against Joe Clark and took the chair away from Clark and became Prime Minister of Canada, and you know the history from there. But as a result of that, the puppet master behind Mulroney in large part was the Demera family, and here they're donating $190,000 to the Liberal Party, Trudeau, for this forthcoming election. The Boudon family, Lord Boudon family, the Bombardier family, $132,000 are going to the Liberals. And it also gives you a sense that if they're all going to Liberals, they must think the Liberals are going to end up controlling this. This minority government may well be led by the Liberals. And with that comes the grants, the favorable conditions for their industries, for their businesses. It opens the door for them to have access to the Liberal government and the highest levels in cabinet office, the Prime Minister's office, to have these discussions of what their needs and wants are. Another, the Aspers, the senior Asper died about 2 years ago, but his carries on $80,000 to the Liberals. Spread around a little bit too, but that's the biggest one, was to the Liberals. And they own the news chain from Calgary all west. And it was interesting, in the last election, they came out supporting Liberals with a very strong opinion poll the night of the election, nationally in their papers, which struck me as being terribly wrong, but they've got personally involved with it. Izzy Asper, he's gone now, but his kids are running it, or were running it. And on the list goes of other families, all giving all to the Liberals, and all went to the block, $5,800 to the block. But it's interesting as you look at that, but it raises a question, not so much to the donations, you're entitled to do this, but the implications of that I've give you $120,000, surely I expect something in return other than a cup of tea. And I would think that these folks are looking for access to the decision makers in Canada after the election, and at least have a fair hearing that you and I probably couldn't get in through those doors to put our case forward. And to what extent is lobbying of this nature, financing of this nature, morally and ethically correct? Good discussion. The HSBC bank in Canada is saying we need to start tracking cross-border purchases of homes because they're inflating the prices. But of course, isn't that an infringement on our civil liberties that if they want, again, this Internet of Things, start tracking our purchases and putting what we're buying and selling in there? Surely this is my own private business. It doesn't belong to the bank to have this database because there's only one step from there to the government. And I'm not sure the government's entitled to know any more than it needs to know, providing I live by the rules of the Tax Act and don't evade tax, but I'm allowed to avoid tax. And we don't need more big brothers watching us. So on real estate, here's an illustration that they want to start tracking all your transactions. So I'm not happy with that. Tritter are going to cut 3,300 jobs. Volkswagen are looking now to cuts as a result probably of that recent event and moving towards electric cars. I imagine a lot of companies are going to be moving towards the electric cars because, again, by 2050, I think we're going to be into alternate energies and the conventional ones will be long gone. Speaking of energy in here, they've got the nuclear energy in Ontario greenhouse gas reducing advantage, all supporting nuclear power. Oh, it's by Don McKinnon. I know Don. Don's the president of the Power Workers Union. Had dinner with him, nice man. Involved in education. In any event, the Ontario is pushing greenhouses, or pushing nuclear power. I believe it to be safe, certainly by 2050. I think if I'm correct on the renewables, be well established by then. Then I raise the question, what's the lifespan of one of these machines, and should we be marking time and building these if they're going to become obsolete as we do the transition and move into this new industrial age that we talk about based on renewable green energy. The LNG is a plant here, again, BC government minister Rich Coleman is telling us how great it's going to be and all the jobs it's going to give us. But when this article went to press, we found out last night that the other side of the argument has just stepped back out of the deal and is not anxious to go forward. So it's going to be troubling. Well, we're almost finished, I guess, for today. I see here Will Rhodes, a nice picture. I don't know if you can zoom in on that or not, Dave, but a nice picture. Will Rhodes, the Cowichan Band, just put up a new totem pole on our land. We have 600 acres here, over 200 plus hectares, and we now have this wonderful carving that's just been unveiled. Maybe this one, Victoria housing plans are going to be cut by $20 million. And this is I mean, Attila the Hun, part of me says, look, we're up to here tax. I work 5 months a year, 6 months a year, and government takes every penny I make. Surely I'm now allowed to keep a little something. But then I read stories like this that we're further cutting back on housing plans to house the people that are in the shelters, in the doorways, single mums with children that need. It's so expensive to live in Victoria, so expensive to live in Vancouver. We need budget price housing for these folks, so at least they can have a foothold in the community, and we're cutting it back. And so it's something we need to find the appropriate balance of, because we can't have folks leaning the doorstep. And I think we have a solution. I'll talk in the coming weeks about a flat tax and a guaranteed annual income. It may go to some of these issues, but that's probably for another day. I think we've got pretty well enough stuff to ingest and digest today. Let's see. There's two things here. What's this about? Idea lumber. Oh, the lumber accord. Yeah, the BC lumber 2006. We signed under NAFTA this lumber accord on shipping our lumber to the States. The Americans shipping theirs to there. We've had this ongoing bun fight over lumber based on the stumpage fees, because our trees are substantially owned and grown by governments, and then they auction off the right to go cut the tree down, and they charge us a stumpage fee for each stump. We pay a little something back to the government for the use of that. The American model, of course, they don't do stumpage fees that way. They actually, farmers own the land and harvest their land and take care of the land for 20 years. And they say it's not a fair comparison, and therefore we're not playing fair under NAFTA, and we've had this ongoing fight, gone to arbitration, won on many occasions. Americans say, I don't care, we're not going to obey it in any event. And so finally the thing has come to an end in the next month or two, and we have a year's hiatus when all the gloves are off, and we can sell lumber however we want to sell lumber, and they can buy however they want to buy. But Clark is saying we're going to go back in and renegotiate a new deal, and I don't think from the BC lumber side of the house people have been happy with the old deal, and I think they should be very cautious about anything new they do on export taxes and quotas and things of this nature. So we can talk about the upcoming lumber accord, as that has a bearing. And, well, I'll close with this grizzlies. Great picture of a little bear up here being shot. Trophy hunting. In BC, we still hunt bears, issue about 250 licenses to folks to come in and walk around, shoot a bear, take the head, take the skin, and leave the body. And we've got lots of bears, but we do it. And I feel uncomfortable with that, particularly after that lion was shot in Africa by that dentist who's had concerns with him too and his values. In any event, folks, that's it for today. I think got a lot there to chew on. I hope you're enjoying the course. I enjoy it, learn just as much from you as you learn from me. And so continue to make it a good one. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye now.